I'm going to be starting off this session by briefly introducing the original collections of mass observation, which cover a period roughly ranging from the late 1930s to the early 1950s. I'm going to talk a little bit about the organisation's origins first, and then spend a bit of time talking through the kind of form and content of that material, just to kind of locate where we're working. So for the uninitiated, and I'm sure some of you might know this already, mass observation was originally founded in 1937 by three men. So we've got Tom Harrison, who is on the bottom right of the bottom image, who was a schoolboy ornithologist turned anthropologist. Charles Madge, who's sitting next to him, who was a poet and a journalist, and Humphrey Jennings, who is in the left of the top image, who was a painter and documentary filmmaker. These three founders were brought together within the pages of the New Statesman magazine after Madge had had a piece published about a London group, a London-based group that he and Jennings were part of. Inspired by the agitation crisis of 1936 and the feeling that this supposedly huge scandal was not in actual fact very much cared about by kind of people more generally, the group was seeking to build a panel of volunteer writers whose work could be used to build a better picture of what the people really thought and believed. Harrison, meanwhile, who had just returned from fieldwork in the New Hebrides, had just begun his own project in Bolton, using a team of investigators to undertake a study of everyday working class life. After reading Madge's letter and realising that there was some sort of overlap in their respective studies of popular culture, Harrison got in contact, was invited down to the next meeting of the London group, and from this meeting, mass observation was born. So it was officially launched less than a month after Madge's original letter had been published, and again, this is in the pages of the New Statesman. In the first official statement, founders of MO laid out their kind of manifesto, emphasising their desire to plot weather maps of public feeling and to look at elements of everyday life which often went unobserved and unrecorded. As you can see from the kind of little extract that I've got up on the screen there, they wanted to really know about the kind of nitty-gritty of ordinary life. So they wanted to know about the behaviour of people at war memorials, about their bathroom behaviours, about the distribution, diffusion and significance of their dirty joke, and about their prejudices and private lives. And so prior to the war, MO's output includes a number of books, such as May the 12th, which was produced from a series of day diaries done around the coronation for King George VI, and other ones like First Year's Work, which chronicle kind of MO's first year. Harrison's project in Bolton also continued under the anthropological code name of Worktown, mapping various elements of everyday life in the northern town. So throughout the 1940s, mass observation continued to kind of collect and produce this material. And whilst the directions and the methods of the kind of organisation change across that period, not least because Jennings and Madge both leave the organisation by the end of 1940, it remains at its core an organisation concerned with illuminating and recording everyday life. So this task, as I said, kind of continues through the war and its aftermath, and results in the creation of an extremely rich archive of everyday life in home front and post-war Britain. By the 1950s, however, the method and focus of MO changes, and by this stage, Harrison as well has left the project as well, leaving it without any of its original founders. So it mostly moves away from the kind of research that it's been doing during the war, and becomes predominantly, if not necessarily, completely exclusively, a commercial market research body. So in terms of kind of what the material that MO created actually looks like, in general terms, it falls into three main camps. The first is stuff which is produced by a national panel of volunteer writers, and you can see the genesis of that in Madge and Jennings' original project. These are people who, as the name suggests, from across the country had volunteered to write for MO about their day-to-day lives. Sometimes their work kind of came through in the form of diaries, so some people kept them for years, even decades, like the famous Nella Lass. But also they replied to surveys and sort of monthly open-ended questionnaires called directives that were sent out by MO. So I've got one on the screen there on the left, which is the October 1942 one. And whilst not everyone on the national panel responded to every directive or even to every question within the ones they did answer, those that did respond often did so at great length with sort of real honesty and candour. So that's one pillar. And the second camp is the stuff that was produced by the team of paid investigators. So this is a team who worked for MO, whose job it was to kind of observe and record the masses from a slightly more external angle. And just as the national panel were the sort of spiritual successors to the London project, these ones were obviously kind of following on from Harrison's Bolton work. They carried out interviews for MO, observed people's behaviour and their actions on the ground, made records of the conversations that they'd listened into, and sent in ephemera that they'd collected. In the final loose category, we kind of have these syntheses of these materials, which were produced by mass observation itself. So this included books. We've already spoken, for example, about 12th of May, Fletcher's work, all that jazz. But this is an aspect of MO that continues throughout the war, with the production of books like An Inquiry into People's Homes. Published in 1942, this was all about the question of what people wanted after the war in their domestic spaces, and was primarily based on investigative material. But perhaps the most substantial aspect of this category in terms of volume is the file report. So these are summaries of the organisation's findings on particular topic areas, which ranged from just a few pages to quite substantial kind of lengthy documents. So for example, on the October 1942 directive that I've got up on the screen there, we can see that question 6 is, what does home mean to you? And from this question, MO would later produce a file report which summarised the various themes that kind of people came up with for that. And in a similar vein, the early years of the war saw mass observation officially contracted by the government to produce reports on morale and public opinion. And these again drew particularly on material from the paid investigators and give a really lovely insight into events like the Blitz. So it's quite a lot of stuff. And of course, each kind of source needs to be considered in a slightly different way, which can make using it all together a bit of a methodological challenge. But I think that the variety of these sources is still one of the greatest things about MO.